Howdy folks, Tex Grebner here with Tex Grebner Outdoors. Hope you guys are ready to make it weird because it's time for your Tex Grebner Outdoors Saturday morning cartoon awesomeness. Now in this video, I'm going to be releasing some of my awesomeness to you because I am not as good a shot as I seem, but there is a technique that I use and the way that I build my arrows that allows me to look a lot better than what I actually am. So I'm going to be passing along some of my secrets. Now, this is not intended to piss anybody off, but I don't believe in instinctive shooting. You don't shoot by instinct. You shoot by a subconscious recall of correct repetitions. But instinctive shooting has a much better brand name. And this isn't meant to piss people off. People teach archery in a lot of different ways. This is me trying to help you shorten your learning curve and basically pass along my secrets for how I look good. Now, I do miss, but I just don't bother to put them in the videos because there really isn't time for you to see me miss. Now, I have a lot of videos on arrow building that I've put out lately. So bare shafting and high FOC arrows. And in this video, I'm actually going to demonstrate to you one of the main benefits of using a high FOC arrow because it is basically weather resistant. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. Now, if you want to support the channel, you can go to TexGrebnerOutdoors.com and check out our Make It Weird merchandise, our Kill with Sticks merchandise, and Life Ain't Like the Pornos, Hunting Ain't Like the TV shows. Now, this is the bow that I'm going to be using for this video. It is my Tiger Shark Pro. Southwest Archery was kind enough to give me an analytics link, so if you're interested in this bow, you can go to that link, which is down in the description, and use that to purchase it. That way they know that you found it from my YouTube channel. I actually like this bow a hell of a lot. Granted, I did not pay for it, but for the price tag on it, I would pay for it. I feel strongly enough about this bow that I'm actually planning on taking it on one of my boar hunts with Tripper. So if you're interested in these limb bolts, because I'm not good at keeping track of an Allen wrench, and I like my bows to be toolless takedown if they're a three-piece, these are the Trophy Burr limb bolts from Three Rivers Archery, and you can use the discount code of Tex Grebner if you want a discount on your Trad Life supplies at threeriversarchery.com. Also, I have outfitted this with a Sure Grip, and I'm using a clicker here, which we'll get into later on in the video. The shafts that I'm going to be using for the most part in this video are traditional only .300s with a reflective arrow wrap and 4-inch right-wing helical feathers. But I'm also trying out something new that is not a Three Rivers product in this video, just to save questions on what am I using. This is the Bishop Archery 315 grain field point, and I'm also using in this video the Bishop Archery 315 grain single bevel broadhead. And I'm just saying this to get it out of the way so that you understand what I'm using to save questions later on. But the point of this video is actually to help you learn how to shoot more instinctively, because I'm not that good a shot. And so there's a few technical things and a whole bunch of fundamentals that we're going to go over in this video. And I feel like that Zen is about the appreciation of the obvious. So I'm just going to get this out of the way before I actually go any further. I'm a split finger shooter. 1 over, 2 under. I don't know how well this would work out with a 3 under style of draw. And frankly, I prefer to teach a split finger because I feel like you've got a lot more control over the arrow.
The weather has been remarkably uncooperative for me, and I've been having a really hard time actually making this video and doing the topic justice. First of all, I don't want to step on any toes with this video. Instinctive shooting, in my opinion, doesn't actually exist. It's not an instinct. The way that I prefer to explain it is a subconscious recall. You have many correct repetitions to the point that you can do everything subconsciously and recognize what is correct. It's not an instinct. However, perfect practice makes perfect, not just practice makes perfect. Now, in this video, I'm going to explain to you how to build an arrow that is going to let you shoot more accurately. Now, there is no way of buying performance. You cannot buy performance. You only get performance through persistence. However, I use a high weight forward of center style arrow. I call it an Ashby style arrow. People have started calling it a Tex Grebner style arrow, but I feel like it would be pretty arrogant for me to name something that is not something that I discovered after me. It's just the arrow that I tend to shoot. A high weight forward of center arrow means that the arrow has more weight on the front of the arrow than on the back of the arrow. Let's say that the center point of the arrow is right here. There is more weight on the front, basically like a pub dart. Now, this is not a new concept, and it's also basically the easiest way of getting a heavy arrow. The reason that I like a high weight forward of center arrow for accuracy is that if you have wet feathers, which is the enemy of the traditional bow hunter, hunting in the rain, if you got wet feathers, your arrow tends to fly pretty wild. The reason that I think that that actually is because these feathers can soak up a lot of water. Water weighs a lot. So it's possible to overbalance your point weight if you're using, say, a 100 or 125 grain point with the amount of water that's in your feathers. It throws off everything about the arrow. But if you have, say, a 300 grain point and you're running an above 19% weight forward of center ratio style arrow, then it doesn't matter how much water you get in your feathers. The arrow is still going to fly straight because the point is what actually guides the arrow. The feathers is for stabilizing the arrow. Now, I had a few days where it was 33 degrees and raining, absolutely miserable conditions, and I wanted to actually test this on film because I've made the claim, but here it is, proof in person. It is 33 degrees. It's been drizzling rain all day. I purposefully left this arrow outside in the rain just to prove a point because this is a high weight forward of center arrow. It's got a 300 grain point and it has been bare shafted and spined. Feathers, as you can see, are completely matted and soaked. And it landed straight in the target just fine. Feathers are for stabilization. Point weight guides the arrow. .300 traditional only. As you can see, the feathers are completely soaked from the rain. I've got this cut down so that it spines out with a standard insert and a 300 grain point. I've got a nocturnal in here so that it looks super cool because we're shooting with wet fletch at 30 yards with my Tiger Shark Pro. Soaking feathers at 30 yards. With this style arrow, if you're a traditional bow hunter, then literally all you have to worry about when you're hunting in the rain, if you do your job, your arrow is going to go where it needs to go. All you have to worry about is trying to follow a blood trail before the rain washes it out. Again, the high weight forward of center arrow is not a new concept, okay? What did humans do before we had feathers on our arrows, right? When you live or potentially die by your bow and arrow, you need stuff that works. And if people that are still living a very organic lifestyle, a very primitive, dare I say the word lifestyle, are using high weight forward of center arrows with absolutely no fletchings on them, with bows that are lucky to be doing maybe 110 feet per second, I don't really think that the marketing of today's archery industry has a whole lot of weight to stand on. Because if you can do it with a 4-foot arrow that's probably 2,000 grains, has, say, I don't know, a 28-30% weight forward of center, down in the Amazon with a bow that is lucky to be getting, I don't know, 110 feet per second if you're lucky, and you can kill a brocket deer at 30 yards through the jungle, yeah, that's just how it is. This is not a new concept. If you have feathers that are soaking wet, how do you feed yourself? You need an arrow that is going to work no matter what the weather conditions are. You need an arrow that the feathers are auxiliary. They're optional. And the way that you do that is by building a weight forward of center that is greater than 19%, so that not only does it bring your total arrow weight up, but it also helps you shoot more accurately because it performs well in inclement conditions. So I like a high weight forward of center arrow. What I also like is an arrow above 650 grains. Now, shooting an arrow that is a heavier arrow, it naturally brings the riser closer to the target, because in order to hit what you're looking at, you're eventually going to learn that you need to elevate the bow. Say that this is the arrow shelf, my face is the target. If my arrow shelf is down here, that's because I'm using a light arrow. If I bring the arrow weight up, but the draw weight stays the same, well then, by God, I have brought my arrow closer to the target, and it is naturally going to make me more consistent. Now, there is a point of diminishing returns where you get to an arrow weight that is too heavy and too slow to be stable. With that being said, these are not new concepts. Now, everybody thinks that they need to get a 28-inch draw. My draw is not 28 inches. Now, we're going to be keeping things simple, because the less you have, the less that can go wrong. But as you can see, I have a clicker on this bow. The reason that I run a clicker is because it is dangerous to release too much of my awesomeness all at once. It keeps me under control, because if I'm fresh, I can draw your normal bow like this draws 60 pounds at 28 inches. I can draw this bow a full 29 inches when I'm fresh. But as I shoot and shoot and shoot, and I do eventually get tired and lackadaisical, I kind of shrink up a little bit eventually. And so the clicker is there to ensure that I am always drawing the same amount, because the bow is strung up. This is known as braced. The bow is braced. This is brace height. With that being said, if you pull on this, it adds tension. The bow is measured at 28 inches, and so if you don't draw 28 inches, or let's say in my case, if I don't draw 27 inches or 27 and a half inches, I don't remember what I have this bow set up to click at, but every inch that this bow comes away from the brace height, it adds weight. Now, every inch or half inch below full draw, it decreases weight. Now, you need an arrow that is going to properly paradox. The archer's paradox is where the arrow flexes as the string drives it forward, and once it flexes, it needs to be able to flex back to its center line. The front and back of the arrow are node points. So we need an arrow that is going to flex and snap back without snapping back too far. That is why when you're tuning arrows for a bow, if the nock is to the left, that means that it's too weak. If the nock is to the right, that means that it is too stiff and it snapped back too far the other way before the fletchings took over. And so the front and back of the arrow are node points. Now, if you have wet fletchings, what that does, if you have a light point weight, is it makes your arrow really hard to stabilize because there's practically an even weight at both ends of the arrow. If you look at a pub dart, it's traveling incredibly slow, but it also has a very high weight forward of center. And so you need an arrow that is going to flex and then return to its node points when it hits the target. Now, this is not stuff that I know through me discovering it. This is stuff that I learned from much more knowledgeable people than me. So you need an arrow that's going to paradox properly, and that's going to come with experience. But the spine of the arrow is the rate at which it flexes on the charts. Now, the trouble is most charts are not designed for running, in my advocation, a 300 grain point. They just don't measure it like that. And so, in this case, this is a .300 spined arrow. The reason that the consistency is important is, like I said, if you have more force by being beyond your consistent anchor point, which we'll get to here in a little bit, but if you have more force, it's going to weaken the arrow. But if you have less force, it's going to stiffen the arrow. So that's why I run a clicker on my bows, is because it keeps me very consistent so that I'm not overspining or underspining my arrows. It's very important to be consistent. And your face is round. Your eye is here. The corner of your mouth is going to be under your dominant eye, normally speaking. Don't think that you need to go super far back. Don't think that you need to go way far back to an anchor point, because the further you drag around your face, it's going to move the nock over one way or the other. If you push in too far, it's going to move the nock this way. If you pull around your face, it's going to pull you out of alignment. We're dealing with very simple concepts, but bad accuracy is like a death of 1,000 cuts. Now, you're not going to see me be perfect. I'm not perfect. However, I try for perfection, and I'm at least decent enough that you can take what I'm saying to the bank, because it's pretty much going to help you. So you need consistency. Perfect practice makes perfect. So that's why I run a clicker, to make sure that I don't overspine or underspine my arrow. But when you select your anchor point, I would suggest going underneath your dominant eye, because if you get a full extension, it's very hard to maintain perfect alignment. I don't care if you're 6 foot tall and you draw a 26-inch draw. The fact is, if you draw a 26-inch draw, then draw a 26-inch draw all the time. People talk about target panic. And just as I don't really, quote, believe in instinctive shooting being an instinct, target panic is a politically correct name for lack of discipline. Discipline is incredibly important. This is a martial art. If you don't believe that this is a weapon, dig Genghis Khan up or Attila the Hun up and ask him. Ask Henry V from Agincourt if this is a weapon. But this is a martial art, regardless of what you're using it for. It demands perfection. But we're also not talking about shooting at extended distances. As far as I'm concerned, some people are very good at shooting a traditional bow at extended distances. But at this point, there's no reason for you to actually worry about shooting over 20 yards. Don't worry about it. Now, my form is not perfect by any means, but I tend to do what's called a Contra. A Contra is a form of follow-through. So I come to my anchor point and I release. And I tend to let my hand do a Contra, which is where the bow comes down like this on the shot. That is not lack of follow-through. That is my follow-through when I do the Contra. If you want to cant your bow, that's cool. Go for it. I actually find that it is a much more organic way of shooting if I actually cant my bow over, because when we point like this. It's natural. I don't care if you draw 26 inches. I don't care if you death grip your bow. What I care about is that you draw 26 inches every time and that you death grip your bow every time. It's when you get inconsistent, then that's when you have problems. Do not release your string until you are on your anchor point. Everything is in alignment. Because as I said, if you try and anchor way back here, or you fight for a further anchor point, you're pulling yourself out of alignment. You need to adjust yourself to your equipment. Not a feather-touching group, but a decent group. Especially considering that I've been talking this time and not actually completely paying attention to what I'm doing. But it's a dead critter. This is about discipline, and I know that it took forever to get here, but there were a lot of concepts that I had to explain in order for you actually to be able to understand just how simple it is, because Zen is the appreciation of the obvious. Once you have an arrow that paradoxes properly and is matched up to your bow, at that point you can take your bow and use an organic draw cycle, hitting your anchor point every single time. Draw and release with absolute consistency and look at what you want to hit. And when you can hit that spot without thinking about it, then move back from 5 yards to 10 yards. When you can hit it 10 yards without thinking about it, with a good, consistent, organic draw, always hitting your anchor, then move back to 15 yards. And once you can do it at 15, without thinking about it, move back to 20 yards. And you don't have to worry about hitting anything any further than 20 yards, because this is traditional bow hunting. We take great pride in hunting close.
Traditional archery and traditional bow hunting is a lifelong journey. You're going to have to be disciplined. You're going to have to learn your equipment, understand your equipment, and hopefully this video has helped you in understanding the mechanics of what is known as instinctive shooting or instinctive archery. So basically, when you can hit that on demand at 5 yards without thinking about it, move back. When you can hit that at 10 yards without thinking about it, move back. When you can do it at 15 without thinking about it, move back. And when you can do it at 20 without thinking about it, you're good. Because this is a martial art. It's going to require dedication. You should not do traditional archery to be cool. You should do traditional archery because it is cool. As always, God bless all my sportsmen in America. Join the NRA to protect our rights. Please come, my friends, over at threeriversarchery.com. Thank you very much to those who are involved in law enforcement and those who served in the military. Thanks for watching Tex Grebner Outdoors.